2021 fiscal year budget. And I'll turn that over to Anne Marie for that.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm still learning all this technology. So I want to make sure that our guests who are Zooming can hear us. And then how do I make it so people can see this? Or just everybody can?
Don't get any sound. You must be muted up there. So they must have a mute on their end. Because it shows the speaker with a line through it.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
All this technology, but I got a good wing person. Okay, you want, is that okay? Sure. We're trying to be socially distant and have Zoom so people who are calling in can hear and see us. But tonight, Mayor, you are calling to order a public hearing that was advertised for the town's budget, the proposed budget for FY 2021. It has been posted online along with the budget message that gives a summary of the highlights of the budget, which include recommendation for no tax increase, for a reduction by $1.50 in the solid waste collection fees to reflect no more, or temporarily no more recycling program, and then also eliminating the one-time 50-cent a month fee that was adopted last year to raise funds to make the needed improvements at the debris site, the yard waste debris site. The Finance Committee met last week and reviewed all of the budgets except for the police department budget, and so we're going to try and schedule a meeting, I think for Friday, for the committee to review with Chief King. But thanks to the Chowan Herald, they wrote a detailed article about the proposed budget, and again, it's been online, so tonight we're hoping to hear from citizens. You don't have to take any action tonight. You are, after the public hearing ends, you can close the public hearing and continue your special meeting agenda. And we are scheduled to conduct a special meeting on June 30th for you to consider adopting the budget ordinance for the new fiscal year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do we have anyone here from the public, either in the room or on Zoom, that wants to comment, make any comments about the budget? Okay, I wonder if we're having a problem. Nobody heard on Zoom my wonderful report. It was the owl was muted. Elizabeth, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry about that, but thanks for alerting. I did just give a quick summary of the budget. The Finance Committee met last Friday, reviewed all of the departmental budgets with the exception of the police department budget, which will be reviewed later this week. The Chowan Herald wrote a detailed article about the budget in last week's newspaper. We appreciate that coverage. The budget has been posted online and will remain online with the budget message, and so we're hoping to hear from members of the public today. But Mayor, again, you do not have to take any action after the public hearing is over. The council will reconvene on June 30th to consider the final budget.
Okay, since we had technology problems there, I will ask again if there's anyone in the public or on Zoom that would like to make any comments or ask any questions about the 2021 budget. Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public. Okay, so apparently we have no comments about that, and everybody had an opportunity to look at it. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the budget amendments, the general fund and airport fund. And Anne Marie, I'll call on you again for that.
Yes, Mayor. Our finance officer prepared budget amendments for you to consider. And these amendments, of course, are to the budget for this fiscal year. And 2 amendments pertain to the general fund. The first one is to cover unanticipated additional legal fees due to issues pertaining to COVID-19. We have the attorney assisted us in developing and drafting the remote meeting policy, then drafting and finalizing the sidewalk dining ordinance, and then reviewing a number of times based on guidance that came out over a series of several weeks about quasi-judicial proceedings in lieu of COVID. And then in addition, of course, the work that Attorney Ben Gallup did with Saoirse on the revisions to the minimum housing code. So that is one part of the amendment. The second amendment to the general fund pertains to insurance premiums for property, liability, and workers' comp that came in higher than we budgeted for. So that amendment is needed to balance this account. We've used used revenue that has come in higher than budgeted, higher than projected from sales tax collections to balance these amendments. And then the third amendment is in the airport fund, and I put a note in here. Ironically, the airport liability insurance was a lot lower than we anticipated, so that's a good thing because we've had to purchase more fuel than was anticipated. So we are recommending that those 3 amendments be approved.
Okay. But we don't need to take any action on that, or do we?
Yes.
We do.
We would ask, I think you can do one motion to approve the 3 budget amendments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have it? Yes, sir.
And the $58,000 above what was anticipated in sales tax revenues, is that still there? I mean, this will come out of there. It means at the end of the year, you think we'll have monies left over in that account?
We do, because we will receive, in July, we'll receive our June,
Okay.
and it will be booked back. So yes, we will have funds higher than budgeted.
I just didn't know what
Even
May
with-
and June might be doing to our budget with the cutbacks in sales. If there was any indication yet that we might take a drastic loss in those months.
We should know in July the collection that we received, or the one we received in May. I'm sorry, the payment we received in June was for expenditures in March. You know,
Okay.
the way the distribution works, it's several months behind. So
Okay.
we have our fingers crossed that it won't be dramatic, but we're pleased that at this point we're still above where we projected that we would be.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions on the budget amendments as we were discussing? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt those amendments.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, the next thing on our agenda is the resolution authorizing up set bid process for the sale of 136 East Albemarle Street. And Saoirse, I will call on you to do that for us, if you will.
Thank you, Mayor. It is my pleasure to be here this evening with you all. So this resolution would be to approve the upset bid process for 136 East Albemarle Street. That is a house located in our North Oakham Street redevelopment zone. And this resolution would be approving the bid of Dale and Greg Cassidy. They're a really lovely couple looking to retire in Edenton. And Elizabeth and I met with them this evening and gave them, or this weekend, not this evening, and gave them a tour of the home, and they have demonstrated a lot of commitment to rehabbing it. They have really good plans or a vision for the home. They've submitted a bid for $25,000, and we have their 5% deposit for the $25,000 bid. I do want to call your attention to the appraisal value of this property, which is $30,000, and that was last appraised in 2017. So their bid is just a little bit under that $30,000 appraisal mark, but I would, they've demonstrated very good commitment to this project and to Edenton. And yes, I guess we would need a motion to approve the resolution. When we're part of this, the notice of sale would be published in the June or July 2nd edition of the Swan Herald next week. And then the upset bid process would remain open until July 13th, and that would be published in the notice of sale as well.
Okay, thank you, Saoirse, for all your hard work on these projects that we're using here, and we're going to certainly miss you. We hate to see you go, but and as I told you earlier, we're still waiting for that ankle bracelet to come in. So,
thank you for meeting with them this weekend. That was very, very kind. I'm interested in the couple. Where they're out of town now and will be moving here?
Yeah, so they're looking to retire in the next 3 to 4 years. They live around the DC area right now, and they've been coming to Edenton for years. They've actually looked at a number of properties in the area and have really fallen in love with the town in general. Vinyl Night was one of the selling points for them, as it is for a lot of people. But yeah, they're looking to rehab the property within the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And then once they retire, they would move to Edenton with the property.
so they're restoring that property for them to live
For
in.
them to live in.
Great, that's even better.
Exactly what we wanted. Exactly what we wanted.
Exactly, that's even better.
Exactly, yes, sir. And there was actually a rendering that Mr. Cassidy submitted of the house that was
Yeah, I
in
saw
your
that.
agenda packet.
Yeah,
And so they really have a vision going for it already.
that's great. That
Yeah.
is.
Would it be possible for them to do their closing here during a council meeting?
Who's handling the closing?
Mr. Cassidy is actually on Zoom right now, yes, he is. And then here.
Here we are. I'm going to brush my hair since we were not on video.
Well, we would just like to thank you very much for your interest in Edenton, and we hear that you're planning on refurbishing that house to live in, so that's exactly, as Sambo just said, that's exactly what we're hoping for and need. So thank you very much for your interest and investment in Edenton.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your consideration. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
And
sir.
this is exactly what we wanted to happen. So this is great. And if you know anybody that can contribute to Katie's church, to the restoration, tell them to call me.
We'll just get him on it.
Well, I think the more contacts, the better, Saoirse has already given me a list of contractors. I've reached out to one of them, Jeff Dawson, and gotten some initial numbers that, for some of the repairs, the roof and the HVAC. And his estimate, of course, are ballpark estimates, but they fell exactly in line with the estimate that I came up with on my own. So this is sort of why we decided on Sunday for sure or Saturday, excuse me, to move ahead with Renovated.
That is great. That is
We knew that
great.
we were gonna do it anyway, but it was really just.
Greg's in the attic, Greg's in the crawl space, checking things out. So we brought our own ladder.
That's great. Well, thank you very much again. Does anyone else have any questions of either the buyers or Saoirse, either one? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I really didn't think we'd get any opposition to that, so motion carried. And again, thank you very much for your interest, okay? And Saoirse,
Yeah, wish us luck, and we'll see in a couple of weeks what happens.
When you put the ad in the paper, put it in very small print.
okay.
Thank you, Saoirse and Elizabeth, for taking time from your Saturday this weekend. Appreciate that.
Okay, and Saoirse, thank you so very much for all your hard work here that you have done, and we really are going to miss you. We really are. Anne-Marie has learned, and all of us have learned to put a lot of confidence in your and trust in your ability, and we can really miss you. And as a token of that, we want to give you just a little memento to take with you about Edenton.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Normally I would hug you, but
Special time.
Thank you, Mayor, and everyone from council. Thank you.
okay, that takes care of our special meeting, and now we will go into our committee meetings. And the first of the committee meeting list is our administrative committee chaired by Councilman Hackney High.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. The Administrative Committee has 3 items that it needs to discuss tonight. The first item is the status of the Young Folks Committee that we've been talking about over the last couple months, and also the next steps that will be involved with that committee. It sounds like it's the Saoirse Appreciation Hour, as it should be, but with Saoirse taking the lead on this, we did a lot of social media outreach to our young people in the community, and we generated enough interest such that we received 12 applications for the committee. We felt like that was ideal. I was worried on one hand that we might not have enough people to apply, and then on the other hand, I thought we might have too many people and we might have to tell some people no. We were thinking that 10 to 12 would be a good working number, and so we've got 12, and what our recommendation would be is for over the next couple of weeks, the administrative committee to meet with those 12 people, and we can break it down into a couple groups if we like, just to make sure that they have a commitment to help us move forward with the purpose of the committee, and that's to try to determine what we can better do to keep young people here and attract young people and make their quality of life better for them. So do we need to take any action, Ms. Knighton? Can we begin the process of meeting with them before the next meeting, or do we have to wait until the next full meeting to do so?
I think it would be okay for us to go ahead and try to schedule meetings
Okay.
and get the process rolling.
All right.
Hack, remind me what's young in Edenton?
Well, we have set 40 and under for that. So I don't think you and I are going to be able to apply for that. So, but if everybody's in agreement, what we'll do is start meeting with those folks, and once we meet with them and get their commitment, we'll schedule an initial meeting, and hopefully within a month or two report to you how that's going. Anything else? Okay. The next item that we have, very similar to the first item, you will recall that ever since the new council was put in place back in December, and also part of our 2020 draft of our vision statement, the council made it a priority to form a Human Relations Commission, and we have not yet formed that commission yet, but realize that now is the time for us to start taking our next steps as it relates to the formation of that commission. One thing that Anne-Marie and I discussed was, as an initial step, have some conversations with Dr. Valerie Batts. A number of y'all know her. She is a relatively new resident to Edenton and has a professional background of, I think, well over 30, 35 years in this type of thing, both governmentally and also corporately. And it would probably be a good idea to sit down and talk with her. She is a local person now, and we've got the benefit of her expertise right down the street. So our recommendation would be that we sit down and talk with her and begin mapping out the purpose of this committee and what this committee would look like, and also get her opinions on how we form that committee.
I think that's awesome. She is brilliant.
Yeah, she definitely knows her stuff.
Yeah.
And Anne Marie, on this, do we need to take any action, or do we need to wait until the next meeting in order to contact her?
I don't want us to get ahead of the
And I'm
council.
I'm trying to get us ahead of it. I
I know we
apologize.
want to keep moving forward, so.
Yes, absolutely.
If there's consensus that the committee can reach out to Dr. Batts and start a conversation, and then we can hopefully be able to report back at the next regular meeting.
That's what my hope was. So if we can do that, is everybody on board?
Well, we got to
Taking
hear
that
her
step.
from her Friday night and know what her interest is, and she did an excellent job speaking Friday night, so. yeah,
That she did.
I'd say let's move ahead with it.
Okay, we'll get together on that and
Does
move
anybody
forward.
disagree?
Any disagreement?
She's great.
All right. The last item that we have is an update on the timeline for planning for a new or renovated high school. You'll recall this is a big topic at our last regularly scheduled meeting, and Anne Marie promised to do her best to get some information for us, and I believe she does have some information that she'd like to share for us on the high school. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Councilman. I did speak with County Manager Kevin Howard this morning, and then also had a chance to read the Chowan Herald. They're doing, I think, a two-part series on reviewing where the county and the Board of Ed have been on the issue for planning for the new school, and I believe there'll be a second article coming up this week. But Kevin did report that the commissioners advertised and held a public hearing on June 15th, and actually then adopted a resolution calling for a special referendum for the levying of a 1/4 cent sales tax. And so that issue, or that question, will be on the ballot in November. And then they also, the commissioners adopted a resolution declaring that if the voters confirm that quarter tax, that money be set aside to be used for the public school capital fund. So I think that was a great step forward. Kevin said that the commission, the joint committee between the commission and the high school, between the commissioners and the high school, are scheduled to meet right after the new budget is adopted in July, and really sit down and work on the time frame, the timeline. But he did emphasize that the delay of the bond, the big bond issue in November, does not affect the timetable that was agreed on by the commissioners early on. One thing that I know you were asked by a citizen who came to our last meeting to adopt a resolution, urging the commissioners to do certain things. And, the commissioners, their responsibility is for funding for the schools. And I would suggest that at your next regular meeting, that you consider adopting a resolution supporting the bond, not the bond question, but the question that will be on the ballot in November for the sales tax. And that perhaps the council could reach out and work with some of our partners to encourage a campaign that would help secure that passage of that important revenue item for the schools.
I got a quick question. Do we have any, somebody told me the other day that we had the town owned some of the land up there. Is that true?
Pat can respond to that.
Yeah, I've been taking a look at that, and actually, it's a hodgepodge of different ownerships. The town owns some parcels, the county owns some parcels, and the Board of Education owns some parcels. And once we get further along in the process, we will need to talk about any bond, and any bank that's providing any financing is going to want that under one ownership, and the three entities will have to get together and discuss which entity is going to hold title to the property in order for the bond and the lending to move forward. So I don't have the map, but the map literally
We
looks
have
like
a fairly sizable piece.
No, there are bits and pieces
Okay.
here and there, and it almost looks like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah,
It's really
like from the Old
strange.
Town Common or something.
Yeah, it's really strange how the ownership of that whole block is, but it's really hodgepodge.
I've always maintained that sales tax is the most fair tax there is anyway, really.
Gets everybody to
Because
spend.
whatever amount of money you spend, that's what you
Yeah.
get, you know.
Okay, anything else to report on that, Ms. Knight? That concludes the administrative committee
Okay.
reports, Mayor Stallings.
Thank you, Councilman High. Okay, the next on our agenda is the Public Works Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Craig, but he's not here tonight, so Anne Marie has agreed to take over in his place.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, and we're pleased to have our friends from SEPI Engineering back with us. Anthony Roper, you remember Anthony came and met, it was before COVID? Was
Yes,
it in
it was February.
February
I
that he
think.
came and met with us? And CJ is here, and if you give me 1 second, I can grab a chair and kind of put him here so he's socially distant. Is that okay?
Yes.
And they are here tonight to report on the first phase of the stormwater assessment that the council funded. And I remember when the agreement was executed, Anthony promised that he would be here by the end of June to give you the report, and here you are. So congratulations on meeting that milestone with the council.
Excellent, good. Mayor Stallings and council and Anne Marie, and I think Corey may be zooming in. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present an update on phase one of the condition inventory and condition inventory assessment of these stormwater in Edenton. So kind of what I like to do, I always kind of like to start at a higher level to kind of set the context for the information we're going to share with you. And this is an update. We do have a second phase, and so we won't finalize, give you a final report tonight, because we want to make sure that we look at the assets in both phases, I guess, comparatively. So I think Ann's going to share the screen so we can.
He's going to try.
Okay, good. That's a good place to start right there. With a slideshow and from the beginning.
Okay.
Good, good. Excellent, yeah. And so I won't spend long on this, just want to kind of just hit the highlights. So, you know, we talked about an asset management effort and data inventory and data collection. So what is asset management? Asset management, I guess, is a model to deliver established level service while managing the individual assets. And you really want to minimize the life cycle cost, I guess, with an acceptable level of risk. And so you say, what's an acceptable level of risk? Well, when you don't have enough, unless Edenton's different than most places, if you don't have enough money, you kind of have to decide how do you allocate those resources and kind of prioritize those resources. So there is some risk that some asset that you're not working on will fail prior to you working on it. So there is some measure of risk there. And so asset management often involves the questions, you know, what is an asset? Which ones are critical? what level of service that you want to provide. And I guess an example of that would be, how often would you pick up trash? That's a level of service. How often would you resurface a street? How often would you clean a ditch or flush out a pipe or replace a pipe? That's what we mean by level of service. What maintenance is required, how and when and how much of that, and then how much. And then, of course, the critical question that the council's involved in is how much funding is needed to do that. And then, again, part of what we did this year is condition. And so you put all that into a process and it spits out, I guess, of asset value. And so if you move on into the next slide. And unless, again, Edenton is different than everyone else, and I've talked to Corey, so I know you're not, is that typically we're on the failure ends, and typically when something fails, when potholes are in the street, when the pipe, you call the public works crowd out at the middle of the night because a pipe failed. That's typically how we maintain our infrastructure. And so what asset management does is it takes you from that failure-based model to a value-based. And so you get on the other end of that spectrum, so you anticipate and you plan maintenance activities and rehab activities ahead of them failing. And the idea is that it saves you money because it's cheaper to preserve and maintain than it is to reconstruct and rehab. So that's philosophically what you're after with the asset management effort. You can advance in. And so some goals of that would be, so again, as I said, shift from reactive to proactive planning and management of the infrastructure, gain a better understanding of what the overall condition and health of the infrastructure is, understand the probability and the consequence of failure. I think that's important that you understand what happens if a pipe collapses and it closes a road. Understand what happens with that. If you move on, I'm going to breeze through these quickly. 6, develop a consistent and defendable methodology of how do you prioritize your work. I'm sure you get questions about why did you pave this road first, or why, those are the kinds of things that you'd want to be able to answer as it relates to assets in your plan. And then you want to focus on, 7, focus on the high benefit cost ratio. So you want to get the most bang for your buck. Move on. And so an example would be for what we've been tasked to do here is on stormwater. And so an asset management example for stormwater would be initially find out what assets do you have, what attributes do they have, what's the construction history, what is the maintenance history of those, what's the network condition. So when you look at, it's one thing to look at one pipe, but what happens when you look at the pipe over the whole town? What happens when you look at all of the drainage features, stormwater features across town? What's the overall network condition? What repairs are required and to maximize performance? And then the key question, I guess, that we all like to know is how much is that going to cost? And then how does one scenario compare to another? So what we were asked to do in phase 1 was to develop an asset collection and condition criteria, develop data collection application to go out and collect that data. The town is organized, Corey is organized in zones. And I think it's how he's got his water and sewer organized by zones. And so he wanted to collect this stormwater information in those same types of zones. And then deliverable for phase 1 will be give you the GIS shape files. Again, the thing with GIS is it allows you at your fingertip to be able to quickly look at all of your assets, where they are. In the middle of the night, if you need to find something, that GPS coordinate will take you right to that drop inlet, that junction box, that ditch, that drainage feature that you're having issues with. And so that's really important if you have something to fail. You don't waste a lot of time looking for assets. And then there's some asset report cards, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute and show you some examples. And then a map. And again, I think Corey has really tried to advance the asset management concept in the town of Edenton. He's really tried to advance it from a technology standpoint. In the old days, you would have in somebody's mind and head, and then when that person retired, if they didn't write down that knowledge, then when they walked out the door, all of your institutional knowledge of your infrastructure went with them. And so I think that was some of what happened here when one of these staff people left. Fortunately, Corey had the forethought to get document and some things they've done. I think there've been some additional previous infrastructure inventory, and so there's some GIS information available. And so what we had to do was come in and try to make that more accurate and get it in a format that is easily accessible. And so what assets did we look at? We looked at, I guess from a stormwater perspective, we looked at pipe that were less than 24 inches, pipe between 24 and 48 inches, and pipe that were greater than 48 inches. And they were pretty much in three distinctive categories: driveway pipe, cross-line pipe that's under the road, and then pipe systems. That is, it's closed system from one structure to the next, from a drop inlet to drop inlet, from a catch basin to a catch basin, junction box to junction box, and it's underground, it's out of sight. So we tried to categorize them in those three categories. Then there's channels. These are your open ditches, and they're in basically two different categories: an outfall ditch or a roadside ditch in front of people's houses and businesses and those things. And then there's box culverts, if you had any box culverts. I don't think there were any in phase one, but there'll be some potentially in phase two. And then we looked at junctions. That would be your catch basins, your drop inlets, your grates and lids, junction boxes, and manholes. And it's important to get these different assets categorized by type, because the cost for maintenance and repair is different by asset type. The criticality is different by asset type. And so it helps you from a planning standpoint to be able to look at the different assets if you kind of can summarize them by asset type and by class. And that'll, again, I can tell you why that's important, I guess, in a minute. And so we basically, from a condition standpoint, there's 5 different rating scales we looked at, from very good being 1 to critical being 5. Very good means it's in good shape, there's no immediate action required. It typically means that it still has its full useful life, the majority of its useful life in place. Good means it's still in an acceptable condition. There's no immediate action. It just means that some of it, you see some minor defects, nothing major. Fair means there potentially is some immediate action, and typically it's maintenance. So for a ditch, for instance, it means there's some siltation that needs to be cleaned out. Same with the catch basin, it might be full of silt that needs to be cleaned out, a pipe needs to be flushed out, or it may have a minor, one joint may be broke, you have to replace that joint. So when you say fair, it means it's still in reasonably good shape, but you need to pay some attention to it before it deteriorates further. Poor means there's some serious deterioration. There's no immediate threat to risk for failure or health and safety concern, but you do need to take some action before something happens. And then lastly, critical means that it has failed or it's imminently failed, and you need to take immediate action. So from a condition standpoint, that's kind of what we were looking for. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, this certainly, can't blow this picture up, but you see this is the zones, the public water and sewer lines that Corey worked from, and he wanted the stormwater assets collected in the same zones. And so for this phase, we did zone 10, zone 20, and zone 50. And phase 2 will be zone 30 and 40, which is the downtown area. So just want to show you that illustratively for kind of what we did. Yeah. And so far as a summary of kind of the data what we collected, and I didn't talk about dates, but I think the council, you all approved this project at your May 12th or so meeting, and in that range. And so we kicked off at a project kickoff meeting with Corey and his staff in Public Works on May 19th, and somewhere in that range. Even though we've been having conversations with Corey for a couple of months and been doing some work in the background, we had a formal kickoff in middle May, and then we collected the data the week of Memorial Week, and I think in about 4 days we collected the data. And so the pipe greater than 48 inches, there's one pipe. There's pipe 24 to 48 inches. There was 514 such data points that we collected, representing about 7 miles of pipe. And this, we didn't break it out for this presentation, but in the final report, you'll see that broken out by driveways, the cross lines, and the pipe system. So you'll see how that breakdown is. But overall, it's about 38 a little over 38,000 linear feet, which equates to 7+ miles. Ditches, there's about 52,500 and so linear feet of ditches. Again, outfall ditches and roadside ditches, about roughly 10 miles. There was 283 data points for that. There's 289 catch basins and 15 junction boxes, and you see the overall summary of the effort that was collected in about 4 days by a couple technicians. And again, I think you may have this in front of you, but just to show you kind of what a deliverable products you would get, so this is a representation of Zone 10, the conditions in Zone 10. If you would expect green, there's two variations of green, may not show up that well here, but the darker green is very good. A little bit lighter green would be good. Fair would be yellow. Orange and red would be poor and critical. So again, is from a town's perspective, council leadership perspective, you get a quick snapshot of what that zone looks like, the condition in that zone, and then can kind of get a quick visual representation of that. So this is zone 20. Again, same color scheme. Red being critical, orange poor, and then so forth, yellow, and the two variations of green. Again, it kind of shows you just the condition, and I'll tell you why, talk a bit in a minute about how you get priority out of that. You move on then to the last one. And that's zone 50, again, same premise there. And so the thing that probably Corey's the most excited about, I mentioned asset scorecard. So for each one of those data features, then there's a scorecard developed. And what the scorecard represents is it has the condition score, it has, you see location, it has the GPS coordinate location, it has the zone that it's in, it has the street name, and there's a little map that shows. So I think what Corey's desire for this is be put this in the hand of an employee or a supervisor. So if we have, this is a very good one. If you go to the next one, Ann, this is one that's in poor critical condition, In that case, the lid to that device is broken, not broken, and so he'd be able to put that in someone's hand to go out and make that repair, or if it's a fair or poor, it might just need to go out and investigate further to see what's the next step that has to take place to schedule that. And so one of the things we're going to provide for him is asset scorecard for all of the data points, but particularly he's interested in the fair, the poor, and the critical, because he can use that for the work crews to immediately begin to prioritize work. And so it's a powerful tool, I guess, from a planning perspective, to be able to have, if they've got mobile access through an iPad, they could pull this up on an iPad and look at it. You can save on printing paper and having, my days, I started early in my career. I guess I heard Mr. Councilman Hyde talk about the youth being 40 and under. And so I've been telling my kids I'm not young, but I guess I've got a formal definition for that now. But I see they've been right, I've been wrong. But back when Ann and I were both on the other side of that group, and I started in maintenance, and people would write complaints on a buck slip, on a pink slip or a blue slip, and the supervisor would have a stack of those slips. And it was hard to know, and one of the frustrations for me as an engineer supervisor would be, he'd go to a street, a road, and then 2 days later he'd go back to the same road because it was a buck slip stuck down in the pile that he didn't have organized. And so this really allows you to pictorially see, graphically see where your challenges are and plan work accordingly. Yeah. And so now I mentioned the 5 asset types that we had. And so the question becomes, how do I go across assets? So something that's a critical pipe versus something that's a critical junction. How do I make that comparison across assets? Or even inside of pipe, the classifications of pipe, how do I pick out which one do I work on first? Well, we think, and professionally, the best way to do that is do a risk analysis. And a risk analysis simply is what's the probability of failure and what's the criticality of failure. And so simply probability of failure means how much time do you have before that asset fails? And it's usually based on condition and the age of the asset. So typically, in a pipe under, say, US 17, it may be designed to last for 50 years. And if it's been there 50 years, then you would say the probability of it failing is you're closer to it failing than not. Correct? And so so if you look at, you talk with Corey, you talk about the infrastructure in town, a lot of it's the original installation. So it means you got significant age on those, and so the probability of failure for some of those are high. Now, then you match that with condition. So if it could be older, but it's in good condition, then the probability of failure is lower than something that's older, but it's starting to show some signs of deterioration. So that's one piece of the equation of risk, is how likely is it to fail? The second element of that is the criticality rating, or the consequence of failure. Again, if it's on a dead-end street and it fails, it's a little inconvenience for the folk on the end of that dead-end street, but in terms of mobility and life and safety issues, in terms of getting the moving of your fire and your rescue and your police and other critical elements, the criticality may not be as important. And so to get the criticality rating, we look at several different things there. We consider things like, what street classification is it? Is it a interstate? Is it a major arterial? Is it residential, where you have a lot of high volume or high density or low density? What types of zoning is it? Is it commercial? What are the zoning layers in the town? What types of facilities are served by that network? So is a church on it? Is a business on it? Is it an evacuation route? So there's different criteria that we'll work with Corey and Ann to kind of decide on those factors. Then the asset type. Obviously, if it's a major culvert, it's a large culvert, it's a large drainage feature. If it fails, it's going to have a greater impact than if, again, a driveway pipe to an individual property, if it fails. And then flooding. And so we could look at the flood mapping, but in eastern North Carolina, if you just go by what's in a flood zone, that may not get you very far. So we had to look at so one of the things we consider would be, does it rarely flood? Does it occasionally flood? Or does it frequently flood? To try to put some value to how important it is to keep those drainage assets open. And so when we get done with phase 2, we'll be able to create a risk or priority analysis over every asset that we've shown you here. Yeah. And so what's the next steps? So we've been working on phase 1. We've kind of collected the data. We've done some preliminary analysis. Don't necessarily want to finish that until we get phase 2. So we kind of look at the entire town collectively. So phase 2, we will get kicked off in late July. After your budget, you get in your new fiscal year. We'll, similar to phase 1, we'll have a kickoff meeting with staff. We'll collect the data late July, August. We'll begin preparation of the deliverables in August and September, which will include data analysis, preparing this overall condition summary report that I talked about, that kind of make some general observations about your stormwater assets, talk about your risk analysis summary, and then lastly, throw in some recommendations about what we think would be next steps for the town. And so then lastly, we may come back and make a final presentation. We say September, October. And again, weather and other things, we hope we can compress that and come sooner, but that's kind of what we've agreed to. But we'll try to get that done as soon as possible. But with that, I'll stop and try to entertain questions. I just want to provide an update on what we've done so far. If you got questions, we'd be glad to try to entertain them at this point. CJ, anything I missed? Good.
Anyone have any questions of Anthony?
I just want to say, I feel like we're in extremely competent hands. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank the town, and thank Corey and Ann for their vision, and look forward to getting this wrapped up. And I think it's given some great information, and look forward to maybe some future opportunities.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. So phase 1, you've done an inventory of everything, but you really have, where some priority problems exist already, don't you?
I think we confirmed, so phase one, we collected data, and I've run it through, we drafted a risk analysis piece, and so when we kind of shown that to Corey, kind of what goes into that, what the inputs of that would be, I think he's okay. I want to kind of refine that a little bit more. And so I think a general statement that would be true would be where he assumed he had problems. I think that the inventory and the condition assessment confirmed where he thought he had problems. I think we were with him this morning. He had a failure, I think it was it Thursday night? Thursday night, and as you would expect, it was a red dot where that location was. So I think, so again, a good public works staff, they know in the back of their head where they've got problems. What this does is it confirms that, but it also gives you a comprehensive picture of where all those issues would be. So as you're making decisions, you can kind of make those prioritization decisions and look at kind of maybe what's one of the next steps. I kind of get ahead of myself, and one of the next steps would be, now that you know what those assessments are and what the risks are and what those ratings are, now you need to quantify and put a value on what does it take to repair, get those yellow, orange, and red dots to green dots. There's a cost associated with that, and so the next step would be to quantify that, and then prioritize those repairs, and then come back to a group like this and say, please and thank you. Yes, I hope that answers your question there.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, how are we looking so far?
Well, I think you saw a lot of green. Now, I think that's the good news, is that the overall condition appeared to be fairly good. You've got some yellow and some orange, and so, but the challenge I think you have is that your infrastructure is aging, it's old. And so your risk factors may be a little higher just because of the age of the infrastructure. So I'd say, and again, I think we looked in some of the low intensity, density locations. So I think obviously from my having worked here and breathed here for a long time, that I would suspect what we see in the next phase is going to be a little more interesting than what we've seen in this first phase. That's my nice tiptoe around your question.
Corey, I see you're on with us. Are you okay with all of this? Or you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine. We spoke last week, and we also met today to kind of go over some things. Been working with CJ and the crew. Actually, the boots on the ground guys, back when they started doing the assessment, we've had a real good back and forth with the guys. We've critiqued stuff. We really, I guess, to kind of chime in on Councilman Coleman's question, we really tried to pick these zones so we could really get a good understanding of how the assessment would go, how the scorecards would be scored, how they would come in, so we could kind of prepare ourselves as we move towards this phase 2 for the entire town. And so we're really excited to be working with these guys, and I think that our product we're going to get is going to be really, really valuable for planning. It's so important to plan this stuff out versus to react to a failure. There's so many unknowns that you can't plan for when that happens, and it often creates a pretty unsafe work environment for guys, particularly with stormwater. So I just want to thank these guys for what they did on phase 1. I'm really glad that we started this relationship with these guys.
Thank you, Corey. And thank you, Randy, Anthony, I'm sorry.
I've been
Sounds
called
like you
worse.
guys have done a great job, and we certainly appreciate the
Thank you, Smith.
effort that you have put in.
Yeah.
We have completed our agenda. If no one else has anything else to bring up, we will stand adjourned.